Hello everyone, thank you for attending. Welcome to NHC's webinar on our 2016 iteration of Paycheck to Paycheck. My name is Brian Stromberg and I am a research associate at NHC, and I am sitting here with Janet Viveros, our acting director of research. I wanted to take a moment to thank Capital One for supporting this webinar and several others before it. With Capital One's help, we have been able to present regular webinars on a variety of housing policy and research topics, which are available in the webinar section of our website. A couple of administrative things before we get into the meat. First, this webinar is being recorded, and the video and the slides will be available for download. Just keep an eye on your email for more information on that. Second, if you do have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions box on the GoToWebinar module. We will get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. With that done, let's get started. I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Janet.
Thank you, Brian. So today I'm going to talk about what Paycheck to Paycheck actually is. So Paycheck to Paycheck is one of our annual releases that looks at housing affordability for workers by examining their wages and comparing it to their housing costs. And so if you want, you can actually follow along on your computer by going to NHC's website, www.nhc.org. And when you get to our home page, you're going to see these large boxes which highlight upcoming events, but also in this case, you'll see in the middle highlights our Paycheck to Paycheck tool. You can also access it by going to our Research tab and going down to Research Tools. So when you click on this button, it's going to take you to our main Paycheck to Paycheck page. And you can see various different items on this page, including our Paycheck to Paycheck 2016 report, which Brian will talk about in more detail later, as well as a link to our supplemental research note, which we created in collaboration with Housing Colorado to specifically look at the housing affordability needs of workers in metro area across that state. And then below, you'll see a link to our actual Paycheck to Paycheck database. So this is something that we update every year, and it contains information. As you see here, contains median incomes for workers in 81 different occupations, and median home prices and typical rents in over 200 metro areas in the nation at large. And what we do with this database is we give you a way to actually compare what people earn to what. And there's two main ways that you can search for this information, as you see here. You can start with the location that you're interested in, which is listed by metropolitan area, or you can start with the occupation you're interested in. So today we're going to start with the metropolitan area. And per the suggestion of Brian in honor of the Cubs' victory, we're actually going to start with Chicago metro area. So once you've selected your metro, you get to choose your occupations. And this list that you see is all of the occupations in the database, all 81. And you can go through and select the kinds of workers that you're interested in knowing more about. So for example, you could select carpenter, you could select a dishwasher, you could select a graphic designer, and a nursing aide. Look like for workers. First chart that you'll see on the page is the home ownership market chart, and you're going to see a series of bar graphs. The first one, furthest to the left, listed as annual income needed, represents the annual income a worker needs to have in order to be able to affordably buy a median-priced home in the Chicago metro area. And the way we calculate this income needed is by starting with several assumptions. And the first is that the worker will have a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, and they will have made a 10% down payment. We use the average effective interest rate from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, private mortgage insurance estimates, and property tax and property insurance estimates to develop what we think is a reasonable estimate of what it would cost to buy that home on a month-to-month basis. And we determine what that affordability level would be based on typical underwriting standards. So keeping those monthly payments of all of those things combined at 28% or less of your income is considered to be affordable in this case. So as we can see here, you'd have to earn $57,678 for those homeownership costs to be at 28% of your income. So now what we want to do is see, do the workers we selected actually earn enough to be able to afford that, to buy that medium-priced home? And as you look to the right, you see that they actually don't. The graphic designer comes close, but still falls a little bit short of that mark. And the carpenter also is a little bit short. But when you look at the dishwasher and nursing aide, you see they are well below that level, that there's a big gap here between what they need to earn and what they actually earn. One of the things that we're doing as we look at this is assuming a one-income household, one worker household. However, you can start to think about what would happen if you had a two-income household for some of these workers combined. So for example, if the dishwasher and nursing aide were in the same household, what would affordability look like then? And you can see that the gap would be smaller, but there would still be a sizable gap. Homeownership wouldn't be affordable for them. The other chart that you'll see on this page is for the rental market. And it's very similar in that on the left side, you'll see the income listed that you would need to earn annually to be able to afford rent versus what you actually earn. And in this chart, we actually use slightly different assumptions. So we assume that the rental home would be affordable if the monthly costs were 30% or less of your income. And to determine what those typical rent costs are, we actually use HUD's fair market rents. And so what we found is you would have to earn $40,040 to be able to affordably rent a typical one-bedroom apartment or home. And you'd have to earn $47,040 to be able to affordably rent a two-bedroom home. Now, when we look to the right at the incomes earned, these median incomes for workers in these occupations, the picture is a little bit better than homeownership. We can see that the carpenter and graphic designer at median income levels would earn plenty to be able to afford a typical two-bedroom home and hopefully give them enough cushion to spend on other important items and potentially save up for a down payment if they want to become homeowners eventually. However, when you look at the dishwasher and nursing aide, there's still a huge gap between what they earn and what they would have to earn to be able to affordably rent in the Chicago metro area. And this poses some real challenges as they try to figure out what their options are. Do they pay more than what they can afford and have to cut back on other important spending, such as nutritious food, accessing health care, transportation? Or do they have to move outside of the metro area and potentially leave their job or face very long, lengthy, expensive commutes? If you wanted to look at another metro area, you could easily make a change by going to this drop-down menu here. And if you wanted to look at another Midwestern city like Des Moines, you could bring it up very easily and update your chart. Or if you wanted to go through the other option that you have, we can go back to the Paycheck to Paycheck home, and we can start with your occupations. So if you were curious about entry, you could select it from the list of 81 occupations. So we could select dental assistant, and then we can compare them in 3 different metropolitan areas. And this lists all 210 here. Cost option like Salinas, California. And you scroll down to the bottom to create. So as you can see here, we have different colors when we're looking at occupations across different metros. The blue bars represent the income needed to affordably buy or rent, and the red represents the median incomes for dental assistants in each of the different metro areas. And off the bat, you can see that in Austin, Jacksonville, and Salinas metro areas, there is a gap between what dental assistants typically earn and what they would have to earn to be able to afford to buy a medium-priced home. Now in Jacksonville, Florida, this gap is not nearly as significant as Salinas, California, but it still exists. And so thinking about households that want to transition into homeownership, this is a real barrier, particularly when we're thinking about moderate and high-cost metro areas like Austin or Salinas. Now, if you scroll down, again, you'll see the rental market. And the gaps are not quite as large, but you can see they're still present, particularly when we're looking at the 2-bedroom homes. So the light gray bar represents the income workers would need to be able to affordably rent a one-bedroom home. And the blue bar represents what they would need to earn to affordably rent a two-bedroom home. And the red represents what they actually earn. So as you can see here, there are really very few options for dental assistants when we're thinking about renting, even though it looks slightly better than owning. Only in Jacksonville, Florida is a dental assistant typically earning more than what they would need to affordably rent a one-bedroom. But across the board, there are slight gaps when you're looking at Austin, Texas metro area and the Salinas, California metro area, and particularly gaps when you're looking at a two-bedroom home. So as I mentioned before, households in this situation are going to face some real challenges in terms of determining where they're going to find housing they can afford or how they're going to be able to pay their rent each month. So before I hand the reins over to Brian, I want to point out a few more items on our page. So as I pointed out here, we can create charts on the fly. We can choose nationwide, and then we can select various workers. And what you can also do when you make a chart, if you want to share it with others, you want to select this option of downloading your chart. When you go back to the main database page, there's a lot of other information that you might find useful. So under the report, this is ranking sheets. And so this will give you an idea of the 210 metro areas we looked at, which have the most expensive rents and which have the most affordable rents. You can also look at home prices that way and get a sense of how rents and home prices have changed in the last year. Below this, you can actually access previous versions of Paycheck to Paycheck to look at older data. And then below that, you can get a lot of information about our methodology. How are we making, what is the income you would need to affordably rent or buy? And what are these metropolitan areas that we're looking at? And some notes. Now the other thing that a lot of folks we talk to are interested in this way of looking at housing affordability, but they want to know what it looks like on a more local scale than what we have here. So what you can do is actually create your own analysis using our methodology. And here is a link to the steps that walk you through the process. And when you look at it, it'll walk you through some ideas for where you can find calculating what would neighborhood or rents in your neighborhood. And so that's a good way that you can replicate this analysis on a more detailed level. So at this point, I'm going to hand the reins back over to Brian so that he can tell you a bit more about our report.
So each year, along with the updated database and everything that goes along with that online, we also release a report that, pardon me, we also release a certain demographic or set of occupations. Last year for 2015, the report discussed the ability of millennials to afford housing and discuss the implications of housing affordability for that particular demographic. This year, instead of looking at a demographic group, we looked at occupations that are typically found in schools. The occupations that we chose were chosen to reflect a wide range of incomes. They included bus drivers, groundskeepers, childcare teachers, social workers, and high school teachers. While teachers often receive the focus in discussions of housing affordability, there are only one aspect of a school's operations. Workers in a wide variety of occupations work alongside teachers to ensure that schools run smoothly and provide quality education experiences to children. School social workers provide important support to students through counseling services and provide homeless children with the support they need to have a stable educational experience. Bus drivers and groundskeepers typically have lower wages than social workers and teachers, but their work is important when it comes to the logistics of maintaining a healthy learning environment. It is the collaboration between these staff that allows the school to function well. The gap between the lowest paid occupation, bus drivers, and the highest paid, which in this case was high school teachers, was fairly significant. The national median salary for bus drivers was $23,412, or just around 44% of the national median, while the national median salary for high school teachers was $56,882, just over 100% of the national median. I should note that these figures and all the other salaries that are mentioned in this report and in this presentation are for workers with 2 to 4 years of experience. The numbers may be higher or lower for individuals or in specific communities. As you can see in these charts taken from the report, the ability of these workers to afford renting or owning a home varies quite widely. Bus drivers cannot afford to own or rent a home in any of the metropolitan areas, while high school teachers, the highest pay group, are able to rent a medium-priced home in 198 out of the 210 metros, or 94%, and they can own a home in 130 out of the 210 metros, or 62%. We can take a look at specific examples of metropolitan areas around the country. Youngstown, Ohio has one of the lowest housing markets in the country and is ranked in the bottom 3 for median home prices in the first quarter of 2016, which is what our Paycheck data is based on. And it serves as a really good example of the affordability issues in low-cost housing markets. As you can see on the chart, which was pulled from the Paycheck data tool, even in a market like Youngstown, the lowest wage earners receive salaries that are under or just a sliver over the limit for owning. And the same is true for the rental market. Moving towards a more typical housing market, the difficulty for the school-related occupations becomes even more clear. In Spokane, Washington, where the typical sales price for homes is near the median for the 210 metros analyzed, 3 out of the 5 school-related occupations cannot afford the cost of homeownership. Only high school teachers are well above the required income. Social workers only barely qualify. Gainesville, Florida has a fair market rent of $887 for a 2-bedroom home, monthly rent of $87 for a 2-bedroom home, which is around the median for the 210 metros we looked at. Again, only the social workers and high school teachers could afford the typical rent for either a 1 or a 2-bedroom home. The higher cost markets, mostly major cities on the East Coast and in California, show extreme disparities between affordable housing costs and salaries. For example, in Santa Ana, California, located in the middle of Orange County and having the 4th highest median sales price, the income necessary for homeownership is more than twice that of the highest salary from the highlighted occupations. In Boston, which is the 13th most expensive metro in terms of typical rents, didn't even make it into the top 10, the cost of renting a 2-bedroom home is unaffordable for any of the occupations highlighted in the report, and a 1-bedroom home is only affordable to social workers and high school teachers. The cost of a 1-bedroom home is more than 50% greater than the salary of a single child care worker. Creating affordable housing to meet the needs of these workers requires considering the full range of policies and programs that help to make housing affordable. Solutions run the gamut from providing direct subsidies to households to creating a favorable regulatory environment. Programs also range in scale from federal programs to local land use. Though many of the solutions described in the report are not specifically designed for school workers, many school workers fall within the targeted income ranges. Part of the solution for affordability comes from local programs. In San Francisco, the Teacher Next Door program provides a forgivable loan for educators working within the city and county of San Francisco. In Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Unified School District is building affordable housing for both teachers and non-instructional staff on underutilized district property. At the state level, several housing finance agencies have programs that increase the affordability of purchasing a home for teachers and others, such as reduced interest rates or down payment assistance. 2 education-specific programs mentioned here are the Connecticut HFA's Teachers Mortgage Assistance Program and the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation's low-cost loans and down payment assistance for education professionals, which includes teachers, teacher aides, libraries, counselors, and nurses. Federal funding also provides support for a range of income groups through its various programs. These include the HOME program, FHA, USDA, and Federal Home Loan Bank lending products, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, and Housing Choice Vouchers, both the mobile and the project-based varieties. Another important aspect of making housing more affordable is creating a financial context that makes credit accessible for both households and developers. This can be achieved through meaningful housing finance reform that provides reliable access to fixed-rate mortgages, multifamily development, and affordable housing projects. This is it for our presentation on the report. If anybody here has any questions that are not specifically about Janet's volume on the webinar, please type them into the chat box, and we will get to them as time allows.
while we're waiting for everyone to submit questions, one thing that I do want to point out is for those of you on the webinar as well as for your colleagues that couldn't make it, we are recording this webinar and we will be making it available to everyone along with the slides from the presentation as well.
We do have one question about the percentage of income that we consider appropriate for home ownership. It was 28% is the percentage that we're looking at that we define as affordable. Are there any other questions out there? More than happy to talk about it. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for this presentation on Paycheck to Paycheck. Before we let you guys escape, I wanted to mention a few events that we have coming up. On December 13th, we have the How Housing Matters Conference, which explores how housing works as a platform for achieving positive outcomes in health, education, and economic opportunity. The day after that, on December 14th, we're presenting our annual Solutions for Affordable Housing convening, which provides a forum for discussing how federal policy can address the needs of local communities. Both of these are being held here in Washington, D.C. Looking a bit further ahead to April, which will be here before any of us know it, we are looking at another Solutions Conference, this time focusing on the importance of communications and housing policy, which will be held in Minneapolis. You can find more details on these events, along with other information on the work that we do on nhc.org. And I want to thank Capital One again for sponsoring our webinar series, and I hope that you all have a lovely Thursday afternoon. Thank you very much for attending.